inner-city crime rocks a small Louisiana town.
We never had a homicide in 11 years.
With no motive, clues, or suspect, authorities take an unusual step.
In order to get a real connect, Rose told me she needed something personal.
White male, 5'8" or 5'10". Dirty, laborer's hands.
We really were fearful that we had a serial murderer on our hands.
These are the true stories of real cases and the psychics who help investigators solve their most baffling mysteries.
Hey everybody, this video was going to be a review of the show Psychic Detectives, but I ran into a little problem and I had to change my format here. I've shot this video so many times and just couldn't get it to work because of how little there was to actually talk about. Because on the show Psychic Detectives, of all the cases, they're all either still unsolved or they've been solved without the help of a psychic. Every one of them. The information the psychics give in every one of these episodes have not led to the arrest of anyone. They gave them nothing. So I'm going to start off, I'm just going to go over real quick one episode of Psychic Detectives. And the only reason I picked this episode is because this aired on Court TV. And then they changed their name from Court TV to True TV. And then after the show Psychic Detectives went off the air and was canceled, they brought in another show called Psychic Investigators, in which they aired the same story, and basically tried to say the same thing, that in both of these episodes they said the psychic, helped solve this case. So we're going to examine the evidence here, see what the psychic said, and see if what information she gave them actually led to the arrest and conviction of the guy who committed the crime. So let's get to it and see what the premise of this show is all about.
Three unsolved murders rock the tiny town of Gonzales, Louisiana. With nowhere else to turn, Chief Bill Landry asks psychic Rose Kopp for help.
Miss Lil. I had Miss Lil's picture in my hand and the handkerchief, and I meditated and I cast my consciousness to where her house is. I astrally walked into her house and saw her lying on the floor. So I moved back in time and I saw him with a knife. Trauma, multiple stab wounds in the back of the face and injuries around her face and neck. A lot of blood.
Kopp wanders through her vision like a detective at a crime scene.
I stood behind the perpetrator to get some idea of what he looked like. I read the label on his jeans to give me some idea of his height and weight. I determined that he was between 5'8" and 5'10". He was on the thinner side. His hands are dirty. His fingernails are dirty. And his hands are thick and calloused like a laborer's hands.
Landry is shocked at the detail of Kopp's description.
Here is a woman in Hawaii across the Pacific Ocean that gave me information that was pertinent to the death of Miss Lee and Philippi.
But before police can follow up on the psychic's lead, the killer strikes again.
So the cop there is pretty impressed that she was able to give some details about the crime scene and things like that. And he's pretty amazed that she's all the way in Hawaii and he's in Louisiana. And how's she understanding all this stuff? And she goes on to make a few more hits, I guess, if you want to call them. She tells him about a slaughterhouse that used to be there. And it's not there now, so it would take somebody of prior knowledge of the place to even know that sort of thing. She gives a clue that she sees like gambling receipts. So there just happens to be a casino in town, so how would she know that? I had to edit this down for time, but earlier in the episode, we hear the same cop say this.
I have a high school classmate who I heard from because her parents were friends with the Philippines.
She tells him about a friend who may be able to help with the case.
A friend by the name of Rose, who was a psychic.
Psychic Rose Kopp lives in Hawaii, but she can investigate crimes without leaving home.
So it seems the cop and the psychic have a mutual friend living in Hawaii. This mutual friend just happens to have grown up and went to school in this town in Louisiana, and just so happens to be a personal family friend of the victim. So where did the psychic get this information? No stretch of the imagination required here. And even in the reenactment of the phone call that he makes to her, they demonstrate that she had prior knowledge of this and was expecting the call.
With nowhere else to turn, the chief contacts the psychic.
My name is Bill Landry. I'm chief of police in Gonzales, Louisiana.
Oh, hi, Chief Landry. I've been expecting your call.
So she's obviously been filled in and is waiting on the call. And what information did she actually give him that they didn't know? The only thing she said was she read his tag on his blue jeans and estimated his height to be between 5'8" and 5'10". Other than that, the police knew everything else that she said, which she could have got from the friend of the family. She could have contacted the family and found out the particulars of what's going on. Easily pass that information on. It's no stretch of the imagination here. She goes on, which, if she's going to take time to read the guy's label on his blue jeans, why don't she walk around the front and see what his face looks like and give him a composite or something. I don't know why she didn't bother with that. Look at his wallet and see what his driver, see what kind of car he showed up in and stuff like that. Look at his driver's license. I can't do that. So she ends up flying out there or something, and she gives them two more pieces of information. One of them being that she sees a girl, a waitress at a restaurant with the last two initials of her name are D.I., so she's thinking Brandy, Sandy, Cindy, something like that. Nothing else to go on with that. Besides that, it was near an old slaughterhouse, which that information could come from the friend. The other one was she said she saw gambling receipts in the floorboard of a car. So there's the information we had to go on. So two more killings take place. She doesn't help solve the crime with any of the information she's able to give. Then the killer strikes again and actually fails to kill his victims. They end up surviving. The female of the couple ends up giving a composite sketch of the guy and a description. And so they pass out flyers with this guy's face on it and a description and everything. And a security guard from the local casino recognizes the guy and says, hey, there is a guy that matches this description whose gambling habits kind of changed a little bit. Around the time these murders started happening, he started dressing nicer and things like that, and that led them on to finding the guy. Nothing the psychic said or did here, even if she was right, even if she was psychic and saw gambling receipts, saw a waitress that ended up being his girlfriend. He did have a girlfriend named Cindy that was a waitress. So even if she was psychic and saw all of this stuff, nothing she gave led to the arrest and conviction of the guy. He was caught because one of the victims that survived identified the guy well enough that they can come up with a composite sketch to pass around, and then a security guard recognized him from the composite sketch. That's it. Nothing the psychic said helped at all. But this show, Psychic Detectives, and another show, Psychic Investigators, both go on to say, well, the psychic help, aided in there catching this guy. And if you go on, this lady's actually got a YouTube page, and the guy's mugshot is her avatar, which is funny. I'll put a link here somewhere. And so, why, I have no idea, because she didn't actually help. So I don't know what the gist of this whole show was supposed to be. Even if you watch the episode, you don't get anything from her that leads to the guy. I mean, I'm not, taking a biased opinion here and trying to say the show said something it didn't. But it doesn't say that. If you watch both episodes, they acknowledge that she never helped at all. She gave them stuff that they already knew and stuff that was meaningless as far as tracking somebody down. She didn't help one bit. So the rest of the episodes on psychic detective, psychic investigators, there was another one, haunting evidence. None of them. Every case is either unsolved, or if they have been solved, like in the case of this one, it was solved without the help of the psychic. Anything the psychic said was worthless as far as the investigation went. So their track record is 0%. So let's take a look at something else real quick.
Even today, police routinely dismiss alternative psychic investigative techniques. But should they? Detective Ron Roark learned that there are ways to witness a crime without actually being there, as you'll see in this paranormal TV classic. Ron Roark is a detective with the Ennis, Texas Police Department. A husband and father of 4, Roark is a 23-year veteran of law enforcement. He is a practical man known for his ability to work the streets. In 1980, he became involved in a missing persons case which altered his views on police methodology and his life in general. On October 12th of that year, a young man who lived in the area disappeared. The young man's name was Michael Dickens. The search for Michael included over 500 volunteers who joined forces with local and county police. In spite of using helicopters and tracking dogs, the enormous effort proved unsuccessful. After several days, the search was finally called off. Shortly thereafter, Dickens' car was located 15 miles from where the search party had been. Police brought Michael's parents to the scene. It was hoped that this would be a breakthrough in the case.
Mrs. Dickens? Is this your son Michael's car?
Yes, sir, it is. Michael loves this car. Where do you think he is?
Well, I don't have an answer for
He's a
that.
good boy, Detective. He's never done anything to anyone.
Well, look, Mrs. Dickens, I understand how you feel. I got children of my own. But I won't rest until I find your son. That's a promise. You just hold up, okay? Okay, come on.
With all avenues exhausted, a desperate Mrs. Dickens contacted a psychic.
October of 1980, my phone rang just as I was walking out the door.
Hello.
Mr. Catchins?
Yes, speaking.
Mr. Catchins, my name is Deantha Dickens. I'm sorry to disturb you. My son Michael has disappeared.
I don't like doing this over the phone.
Please hear me out.
Yes, ma'am.
He's been gone for over 2 weeks now. Is there anything you can tell me?
I don't get good feelings about your son, and I wish you'd phone the police, let them handle this.
Please help me. I've got no one else to turn to.
Miss Dickens, I'm sorry. I feel your son has been murdered. And his body is buried in a grave somewhere close to home. And I would really rather talk to a law enforcement office. Would you please do this for me? Have the police phone me. Thank you.
I'd much rather talk with a law enforcement officer than I would with the family. I prefer to do it that way because I don't like the emotions involved that you have to deal with a family when they're feeling sorrow and have all that fear and hurt. It's hard to tell a mother that her son's not coming home.
So the psychic and the cop end up getting together. Psychic tells the cop where to go find the body. Cop goes out there, doesn't find anything. Comes back, tells the psychic he didn't find it. Psychic says, hey, you need to follow my instructions to the letter. Take 2 guys with you. And so he goes back out there. They find the body, Viola. They go to the nearby house and arrest the guy, and the psychic has saved the day. Except if you look into the case at all, you find out that the guy was actually apprehended driving the victim's car. They pulled him over driving the car. That made him a suspect. They went and searched the property, found the body. Unlike this little fake show that says they found the car and that was it. They don't know, nothing came of finding the car. The killer was caught driving the victim's car. That's how they put the two of them together. But the problem with this show is something that one of the things I kind of picked up on while I was doing these investigations of all these different stories and things was like Court TV, you know, Biography, A&E, all these channels. They don't actually make these shows. These shows are made by little production companies who in turn sell them to Biography, Court TV, Sci-Fi, whoever. So Sci-Fi don't really make, you know, shows like this. And so this show is apparently made by one of these little companies, and it's pretty old because the psychic in this show died in 1987. So I mean, the footage of him there is pretty old. So this never actually made it to air, but it's on YouTube. Somebody got a hold of it and put it on YouTube, although it never seemed to have made it onto the air anywhere. And it just seemed to be a reoccurring thing, because once I started looking into some of these cases, because once I hit my dead ends looking for cases that have been solved by psychics, you know, from Psychic Detectives, Psychic Investigations, all these shows, you know, I wasn't finding anything. And so I was like, okay, well, let's look at, you know, because the internet's a buzz with all this stuff. You know, psychics are real, you know, here's proof, you know. So I'm like, all right, let's look at your proof. I kept coming across one site, and it is by a lawyer who is like trying to make, he's trying to sell books. But his website's supposed to be the case for, you know, the afterlife. And I didn't read the whole thing. I didn't bother. I was only interested in the Psychic Detective sections. And he lists, you know, a number of them, 15 or so, that are like the best evidence for psychic detectives. And so I started looking at them, and I was like, well, I'll just go through each one of these cases, examine every case, and I'll see if this panned out. But I ended up having to stop once I saw this. So the guy states right there that all the information that he's presenting here is taken from television shows, Psychic Detectives and Cineflex Productions. Quick search reveals that Cineflex Productions is the company that makes the documentary show or fake documentary show Psychic Investigations. So, I mean, that's the level of this guy's evidence that he's putting forward. And so what do you do with that other than say, yeah, nice try, come back? If you're not looking into the police reports and, you know, behind the scenes of what's going on, and you're just taking these shows as, you know, truth, you have nothing else to say. That's the end of the conversation with somebody like this. But my wife started asking me why I was doing it. I've been doing this for quite a while, you know, researching some of these stories and police reports and things. And my wife asked me about it. She's like, why in the hell are you going through to all these links, you know, to try to disprove psychics? And I'm not, you know, starting from the point that I'm going to disprove psychics. I wanted to see what the evidence was and see if it actually showed what they claimed. Because I'm a parent. I've got 2 little girls. And if somebody kidnapped one of my little girls, it would break my heart. I would just, I don't even know what I would do. And so what do you do as a parent if a psychic knocks on your doors claiming to be able to help you? And so, you know, I imagine myself in this situation. And it's like, you know, I wouldn't refuse help from anyone. I mean, if one of my little girls was gone, I mean, I would just be looking for help from anywhere. But if somebody knocked on my door who was, you know, a bullshit artist trying to charge me money to help me find my daughter, and they're full of crap, I'm probably going to beat the snot out of them on my front lawn. And so let's take a look at something else. And this is one of the reasons why I do what I do.
It is heartbreaking, a situation that thousands of parents find themselves in every year. Their child is missing. Grief-stricken parents will turn to just about anyone, even so-called psychic detectives. So Lisa Guerrero and the I-Squad put some prominent psychic detectives to the test. Are they selling false hope?
I would tell her that I love her and I miss her.
A tearful plea from the mother of a missing teen. John and Joanne Lowitzer have been searching for their 17-year-old daughter, Allie, since she vanished last year.
What do you think happened?
But when the case made national news, The Houston parents say they became inundated with calls from so-called psychic detectives. They say some even showed up at their front door, promising their psychic visions could help bring Allie home.
He guaranteed me that he'd find Allie in 3 days. I mean, what parent wouldn't be excited to hear that you're going to have your daughter home in 3 days?
Mark Klass, whose daughter Polly was abducted and killed more than 20 years ago, warns families to avoid psychics, saying they prey on the desperate.
They descend like vultures.
And send police on one wild goose chase after another.
Never in the history of the world has a psychic solved a missing child case. Never.
But countless psychic crime fighters, like Portland, Oregon clairvoyant Lori McQuarrie, claim they've helped solve hundreds of missing persons cases.
I've been in business with this for over 30 years.
So we decided to see what would happen when we asked a psychic detective to help solve a missing persons case. Posing as the distraught brother of a missing child, we sent our producer, Charlie McElravy, to meet with Lori McQuarrie.
Hi, how are you? Very nice to meet you, Lori.
We showed her a photo of this missing girl, and she agreed to take the case for $400.
But I think it's solvable.
But what Lori didn't know was that the photo our producer gave her was actually a childhood photo of me. And obviously, I'm very much alive.
I don't believe she's alive. I'm sorry. I believe that it was a violent passing.
McQuarrie's sixth sense told her the girl was brutally murdered and sexually assaulted.
I think she was hit in the head with a rock.
But her visions didn't end there.
I think she can be brought home.
Pointing to a remote spot on this map, she even said she could help bring her body home.
And maybe even a mile or two from there.
The next day, McQuarrie sat down for an interview with me to talk about the work of psychic detectives.
I just had a gentleman in yesterday. 30 years ago, his sister disappeared.
She soon began talking about a recent case, but clearly her psychic abilities didn't tell her that I was the girl in the picture.
One of the first things I do in a case, Lisa, is I always make sure people know that if I feel the person is living or not.
So you'll always know,
yes,
when you talk to a family member, when you start a case, you'll know if this person is dead or
yes,
alive.
And that's the point, is that
every time.
Yes.
But apparently her psychic abilities didn't see this coming.
Lori, I'm going to show you something.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
Does this girl look familiar to you?
Yes, she does. I worked this case.
This is a girl who you said was beaten and killed.
Okay.
This little girl is me. And you told somebody that she's dead.
Wait a minute. You didn't disappear?
I'm right here.
Well, that's interesting, isn't it?
How do you explain being completely wrong?
I can't explain it. I can't explain it.
You're charging them hundreds of dollars.
You know what, dear?
Hundreds of dollars. You're taking advantage of desperate people with a bunch of hocus pocus, aren't you?
No, I'm not. I think we'll go. Thank you. It's been an interesting experience. You all have a lovely, lovely evening.
Until I see my daughter physically, I'm not going to believe anything that any of them say.
All told, 10 different psychics told our producer that Lisa had been murdered. And the FBI says to Inside Edition that they are not aware of any criminal investigation that has been solved as a direct result of information provided by a psychic.
So you can see this lady's clearly there to make some money. She took the case for $400 and then gave completely bogus information to the guy. And this sort of thing is just what they do. They claim, you know, oh yeah, I worked that case. They don't tell you that that case is unsolved, or they don't know anything about that case. And even this lady claimed to have solved 27 missing persons cases. And so I started checking into it to find out what these 27 are. Come to find out, I'm not the first person to look into what these 27 cases are. And I'm not the first person to find out that she won't reveal what they are. Nobody knows what agencies she's worked with on these 27 cases. Nobody knows who these people are that she supposedly found. She just makes this claim and throws it out there and has no evidence for it. So I looked around and I found one clip that kind of led me to another case.
Psychic detectives, it might sound a little far-fetched, but law enforcement agencies all across Oregon are using these people to help crack cases.
KVAL's Kim Quintero sat down exclusively with a woman who makes her living by using what she calls intuition to solve mysteries, including some of Oregon's most notorious crimes.
because we all have it. It's different degrees. You know, pay attention to your dreams. Pay attention to just feelings.
Lori McQuarrie has a knack for listening to her gut. As a psychic consultant in Lake Oswego, she says she's helped find the bodies of 27 murder victims in 26 years.
I've worked with a lot of detectives. Some of them aren't comfortable talking about it. Some of them don't even want their department to know about it.
McQuarrie used to lead a normal life, but the former nurse started having nightmares and visions after a fall from a horse forced her into a coma for 3 weeks.
Starting having precognitive dreams of plane crashes. And I had no idea what it was about because they happened within 3 days after I dreamed them. I thought I was nuts.
Word spread, and McQuarrie opened her business. Then, in 1986, her first case came out of Clackamas County, where a young woman was murdered by her own husband.
And I was so nervous. I was so nervous because you know what these cops are like. They're impassive. You know, you can sit there and tell them every nuance about the victim, 50 pages worth, and then they'll go, yep, that's right, but where's the body?
Detective Bob Lee was working that case.
After about 2 months, you've pretty much done whatever can be done from a police department standpoint. The woman had simply disappeared.
Lee met with McQuarrie, and she gave him a list of what she sensed about the murder.
What was going through your mind when you're hearing all of this?
Well, some of this stuff was fairly generic, you know, like you would pretty much, if you describe one case, you've described them all, that sort of thing. But some of it was very, very specific, like the younger brother being involved in the burial of the body.
Lee and McQuarrie later married. McQuarrie told me she got involved in Brooke Wilberger's case after getting a call from one of Wilberger's teachers. The psychic took notes and passed her thoughts on paper back to the teacher, who then gave them to Corvallis police.
I said, don't even tell the police who it's from. If they're going to wig out and think it's a psychic, don't. Just say somebody was just thinking these thoughts and give it to them just to be taken seriously.
McQuarrie also told me she thinks Wilberger's body is in the Crabtree area.
Right there, and I felt she was off the road like it was a logging tree road, which we have many of those. But I think she's probably about 150 feet off to the right of a road.
I called Corvallis police, told Lieutenant Tim Brewer what McQuarrie sensed, and asked if searchers ever looked in that area. He would not confirm where searches had been and said, frankly, we never waste our time on psychics. We've had hundreds of psychic tips from the very beginning. We don't use them because it takes away time from our legitimate resources.
People that are going to be watching my story are going to say, you could be a con artist, you could be a fake. What would you say to that?
I would say I cannot change people's opinions if they have a mindset to that. I think if they ever bothered to look at my webpage, if they would take the whole picture of how long I've been doing this and for how many years I've done it for nothing, for gratis. And
McQuarrie believes each of us have an intuition, a gut feeling that we just don't listen to. When Diane Downs shot her 3 children over 20 years ago, and lied to detectives about a strange man doing it.
And I thought, that's bullhunky. There was no bushy-haired stranger. The next day, I had people calling my office clients, going, that lady's lying. I mean, these are people who just, you know, they're bank tellers or whatever else in life, and they are certainly not exercising that ability, but they were.
Reporting in Lake Oswego, Kim Quintero, KVAL News.
The Lane County Sheriff's Office hired 2 psychics to examine the 2005 murders of campers Stephen Haugen and Jeanette Bowman near Oak Ridge.
Tonight, that case remains unsolved.
So a big surprise there at the end that the other police department hired 2 psychics for a case, and it's still unsolved. But there at the end, she said that people were calling her office, or calling her, when they saw a story on the news that they didn't think this lady was telling the truth. So she says, these people were just everyday people using their psychic abilities, and we just all need to learn to tap into it. But if that's the case, the whole world is psychic, because everybody had their intuitions on the Casey Anthony case, the O.J. Simpson case. I mean, everybody's got their opinion on these cases that are, you know, shown on TV. But she goes on and talks about the Brooke Wilberger case. And at the time that this interview was shot, this case was unsolved. And since nobody, you know, contacted her except for a school teacher, you know, she decides to go on TV and make her little claim here. And she points at an area on the map. She says, yep, I think the body's right here in Crabtree, Oregon. And I started looking into it and found out that this case is actually solved now. Come to find out, the guy who did it was arrested and convicted in a similar case. Actually, the girl got away, I think, in this one, and she ID'd him. They caught the guy. And then come to find out, he lived in this town, Corvallis, where this Brooke Wilberger was abducted at the time. So he lived there at the time the abduction took place, and then he was caught doing something similar somewhere else. And so he ended up confessing, and as part of a plea deal, he told him he would take him to show him where the body was, and guess what? It was not near where she said it was. She was completely wrong. It was in the opposite direction. She claimed that if you read the story on it, she didn't say in this video, but if you read the story on it, she says she saw a major highway, and it was to the east of the highway, and so she narrowed down this Crabtree area, which is, the search area she fingered was about 300 million square feet. So, I mean, it's a huge area for one. And then it's completely on the opposite side of the highway and miles in the opposite direction from where the body was actually recovered from. So this lady is just nothing more than a complete clown. And one more thing that to add on to this was, if you noticed in the video, she ended up marrying the police officer who was involved in one of these cases that she works on. And so he's, one of the police officers giving her this testimonial saying, yeah, police officers back me up and say I'm doing a great thing. Well, this cop here, he's one of them. It's her husband. And this seemed to be a reoccurring theme as I started checking this out throughout the 70s and 80s when this was a big deal. And if you look into most of these cases, this is when these supposed best evidence cases took place, was during the 70s and 80s. This seemed to be a reoccurring theme that these ladies who claimed to be psychics were partying with these cops, and so who knows what happened behind closed doors. Even the Noreen Renner case, she moved to the town where she supposedly solved this crime, and this cop was giving her all kinds of rave reviews and stuff. She moves to the town, and then the cop ends up dying, and guess what? She moves away. So I mean, it's a little bit fishy, when you start looking at some of these cases, and the expert police that are given their trying to give these people credibility. And I'm actually going to stop this video right here, and I'm going to continue in a second part because this is getting very long, and I've got some more ground to cover. So I'll see you in part 2.